This is a hands-on tutorial on how to create a title screen for a game. By the end of this tutorial, we'll have a complete menu with a transaction effect that supports both mouse and keyboard inputs. If you'd like to follow along, there's a link for the project with all the assets on the description of the video. To begin with, we are first going to change a few things on the project settings. First, down on the display and window, we're going to change the resolution of our game because right now we have a 4:3 resolution radio and we actually want it to be a widescreen resolution. So we're going to set it to 1280 on the width and 720 on the height. We're also going to change the background color of the game, so go up and find Environment under Rendering, click on the default clear color, and I'm going to change it to 26, 31, 38. Don't forget to press enter. And now we have a nice gray-blue as our background color. Now that our project is configured, we're going to start creating our title screen. To begin with, we're going to add a new node to our scene, which is going to be of type control. Rename this to title screen by pressing F2 while having the node selected. Go to layout and click on full rect. This is going to expand the rect of our control node to cover the whole screen. If I press H, you can see that it's anchored to the top left and right and bottom left and right of our game screen. This node is the base node of our menu, and it's going to hold all the other control nodes that we're going to have on this scene right here. Now let's add a VBox container. And let's rename it to menu. We want to have a gap between the borders of our game and our whole menu. As this menu is going to hold the other control nodes, we're going to go to the inspector and under margin, we're going to set the left one to be 120. The top one is going to be 80. The right one has to be the whole width of our game minus 120. So this is going to give us 1160. And the bottom one, the same thing. The height of our game minus 80, which is the same margin that we have on the top. So this is going to give us 640. Now, as you can see, the VBox container rect is placed nicely on the center of our title screen. We can now start adding the elements of our menu, and we are going to start by adding the logo. So with the menu selected, add a new child which is going to be of type texture rect. We can already rename this to logo. And inside the title screen folder, we're going to find a logo.png. We can drag and drop it to our texture property under the inspector. You can notice that the logo is all the way to the left of its rect. And to keep it centered, we're going to change the stretch mode from scale on to keep centered. And now, as you can see, our logo sits nicely on the center of its rect. Now we're going to add some buttons to our title screen as well as a picture of our characters. And for that, we're going to need first a horizontal box container. So let's add a new one to our menu. Let's search for hbox container. Now we can rename this to center row. This container is going to be responsible for keeping our buttons separated from our character's photo. Before adding anything to it, we'll first go to its size flags. And on the vertical, we're going to select Fill and Expand. This stretches our horizontal box container vertically, and now it's covering all the remaining space left on the y-axis of its parent rect, which is the VBox container we called menu. Now we're going to add a new box container to this center row, and this time it's going to be a VBox container. This container is going to be responsible for holding the options that we have on our menu, as instance, new game, continue, and options. We can rename it to buttons. And again, we're going to go to its size flags, and this time we're going to set both the horizontal and vertical as Fill and Expand. This is because we want this buttons node to cover half of its parent rect once we add the character's image. And you'll see that in action in a little bit. But first, we're going to start adding our actual buttons to our VBox container. So I'm going to add a new node. This time is going to be of type button. I'm going to create it. I'm going to rename this to new game. And I'm going to change a few properties here under the inspector. We don't want this button to have the default styling that it has right now. Actually, we don't want it to have any styling at all. So we're going to select flat. And this is going to leave us with a blank button. But now we need to add some text to it. And because we want to style our text, we will have to add a child to this button. And this child is going to be a label. So we're going to click here to add a new child, search for label, and add it as a child of our button. We can set the text of our label to be new game. And as you can already tell, the text is really small, and we're going to use a custom font to fix that. Go all the way to the bottom until you find custom fonts. And here you can create a new dynamic font. After you created it, click on it. This is going to take you to the dynamic font inspector. Under font, you'll find font data. And here we can load a custom font. Click on load, go to the title screen, fonts, and here you're going to find a custom font. Double click it. Now we are not going to see any text at all. This is because here under the settings, our size is set to 0. And we're going to set it to 48. Now before we continue, we are first going to save our dynamic font in case we want to reuse it on different control nodes. To do that, we're going to click on this save icon and click on save as. Go to the title screen, fonts. And it's usually a good idea to name your dynamic fonts as the custom font name followed by the size that you gave to this dynamic font. In this case, it's going to be Montserrat, and please forgive me if I pronounced that wrongly, underscore 48, which is the size of our dynamic font. Now that our dynamic font is saved, we're going to add a shadow to it. So we have to select the label and go all the way to the bottom until you find the custom constants. Select shadow offset X and shadow offset Y. And on the Y, we're going to set the shadow offset to 5. We still can't see anything, and that is because we haven't set the color of our shadow. So go a little bit up until you find custom colors. Select custom color shadow. And I'm going to give mine a color of FF9700. Again, don't forget to press enter. Now, as you can see, we have a pretty nice shadow to our label. Lastly, we just want to set the layout of our label. And to do so, select your label, go to the layout, and set it to be a full rect. As you can imagine, our menu is going to have more than just one option. And because of that, it's a good idea to save this branch as its own scene so we can unhire from it and create custom options for our menu. Click with the right mouse button on the node and click on Save Branch as Scene. We're going to save it under the title screen and we're going to create a new folder called Buttons. And here we're going to save this scene with a different name, which is going to be Menu Button. And we can click on Save. Now, as you can see, our option has its own scene and we can click here to go to it. We're going to rename the root node to be Menu Button. And here on the label, we can set its text to be label. Now we can save this scene. We are going to create 3 new scenes, which are going to be our new game, continue, and options that we're going to have to our menu. Also, right now is an awesome time to save our scene, just in case Godot crashes on us, so we have it already saved. I'm going to save the title screen scene on the title screen folder with the name of title screen. And now let's create the options for our menu. So we're going to create 3 new scenes, and they are all going to be inherited scenes. So click Scene, New Inherited Scene. We're going to select our menu button. And here on the label, instead of having the text as label, we're going to set it to New Game. And we're going to rename the root node to be New Game Button. And now we can save this on the same place as we saved our menu button. A new inherit scene from the menu button. This time is going to be called Continue Button. And the label text, as you can imagine, is going to be Continue. Save. And lastly, the Options button, which again is going to inherit from the menu button. Rename the root node. Save. Same folder. Now back to the title screen, we can delete this new button right here and add our 3 newly created scenes. To do so, click on the link, title screen, buttons, first the new game menu, then the continue, and then the options. As you can see, everything looks a bit weird and all cramped together. That's because the rect of our button is really small and we have never set it to be different. To fix that, we're going to go to the menu button, select the root node, go all the way to its rect, and under minimum size, we're going to set the X to be 360 and the Y to be 60. Now, as you can see, the rect of our menu button covers nicely our label, and we can save this. And because we're using inherited scenes, you can see that this change has been reflected on all of our other scenes. Now, all of what's left for us to do is for each one of our buttons, get the information that we just changed on its original scene. So we can do this by finding the rect, going to the minimum size, and clicking on this arrow right here. As you can see, everything looks much better now. To finish off, we're going to select our buttons node. On the top, we're going to set the alignment to be at the center. This way, our buttons are always going to be at the vertical center of this container. And lastly, you can search for separation, so we can add a nice margin between our buttons. And we're going to select separation and set it to 20. To finish off our center row, we're going to add a new node, which is going to be of type center container. Under the inspector, go to size flags, and here we are going to set the same configuration that we have on our buttons VBox container, which are fill and expand on both horizontal and vertical. And now we're going to add a new child to it, which is going to be of type texture rect. We can rename this to characters. And as you can imagine, we are going to drag and drop the characters.png that we have under the title screen folder to its texture property. Our menu is almost done. All of what is left for us to do is add a nice footer to it. We can minimize the center container and the buttons. And on the menu, we're going to add a new node to it, which is going to be of type label. We can rename this to version label. On its size flags, we're going to set the vertical to be fill and expand. This way, it's taking all the left space that it has to take. On the text property, we're going to click on this icon so it opens up this menu for us. And here we can type with new lines as well. So again, this is just some random text. You can use anything that you like. I'm just going to set the version to be 1.2.4 and give the name of our studio, close, and now we have the version of our game and the studio that created it. All of what's left is adding a nice font to it, because right now we're using Godot's default font. The process is pretty much the same as we did to our buttons. Go to the custom fonts, create a new dynamic font, and we're creating a new one because we are going to use a different size than the one we used on our buttons. Click on the dynamic font, load the font data, which is going to be the same. And under the settings, the size is going to be 24, which is half of what we have on our buttons. And we can save this again in case we want to reuse it on the future. But instead of calling it Montserrat 48, it's going to be Montserrat 24. Don't forget to save your scene. And now if I press F5, I'm going to be prompted to select the main scene of our game, which is going to be the title screen. We have a pretty nice menu that we created using some simple Godot nodes, and no coding has been involved whatsoever until now. Now we have two things left to do. Add a transition between scenes when you click on an option, for instance, the new game, continue, or options, and also give our player a way to select any item on the menu using his keyboard and not only his mouse. Now, the transition effect is going to be a black fading, and to achieve that, we're going to use a type of node called color rect, and we're going to add it as a child of our root component. And as you can see, it's sitting at the origin of our game. We're going to set its layout to be a full rect. This way it's going to cover the whole screen. We can also rename this to fade in instead of using color rect. And under the inspector, the color is going to be black. And we are also going to change the alpha value from 255 to 0 because we want it to fade in. So we want to start at 0 and go all the way to 255 as I'm showing you right now. To do so, we're going to add a child to this fade in, which is going to be of type animation player. And we're going to use this node to animate the fade in. As you can see, the animation tab has been already open for me. I'm going to click on the plus sign to add a new animation, and I'm going to call it fade underscore in. Right now, the length of the animation is at 1 second, and I want it to be half a second, so I'm going to set it to 0.5. And now we have to start animating the properties of our fade in. To do so, with the animation tab open, click on the fade in. And now you can notice that we have this little key at the side of every property of our fade in node. We want to animate the color. Remember, we want to change the alpha value of the color. And to do so, we're going to click on the key to add a new keyframe to our animation. It's going to ask us if you want to create a new track for this property, and we're going to click create. And now we have a keyframe at the frame 0 of our animation. To achieve the fade in effect, we want our alpha to be at 255 when the animation ends. So I'm going to drag the cursor all the way to the end at 0.5. And here on the color, we'll set the alpha to 255. And now we're going to click on the key again. And Godot is going to take care for us of animating this alpha from 0 to 255 in half a second. If I drag this to the beginning again and I press play, you can see that we have a nice fade in animation. To finish off, I'm going to drag the cursor to the beginning again. I'm going to close the animation tab, and we're going to save this as a scene. Go to the root of our project, create a new folder, which is going to be called fade underscore in. And now we can save this node as a whole new scene. You can notice that now if we try to move, for instance, our center row, we're not going to be able to. That is because our fade in node is on top of everything. I'm going to press Ctrl Z to bring it back to its original position, and I'm going to hide it so we don't run into that problem anymore. Before being able to test our animation and wiring everything up together, we first need a few scenes to go to in the first place. And because of that, we are going to create 3 placeholder scenes, one for new game, one for continue, and one for options. So click on scene, new scene. The root node is going to be of type control, and it's going to be a full rect. We can rename this to new game. We're going to add as a direct child of it a center container, which again is going to be full rect. Then we're going to need a VBox container, which is going to hold just a label and a button to get us back to the original scene. And under this VBox container, we are going to add the label, and we're going to also add a button. Remember that we saved our dynamic fonts beforehand. Now is when they're going to come in handy. Select the label, go to the custom fonts, and now all we have to do is load the Montserrat 24 and set the text to be something like new game scene, so we know in which scene we are. And on the button, we are going to set the custom font to be the same one that we used for our label. And the text is just going to be back. We can also give some style to our label as we did to our buttons on the title screen. So under custom constants, shadow offset, same configuration that we had before. Colors going to be the same thing. FF9700, enter. And I'm actually going to change the font that we are using on this label to be the Montserrat that we used on the buttons as well. And now we have a bigger label that's just going to make things easier to see. Now let's save this. Under the root of our project, we're going to create a new folder. It's going to be called game. And we can save this as new game. And now we're going to create 2 new and highlighted scenes from new game. One for continue. And the label has to change as well. And one for the options. If I press F6 or click on this button right here to play this exact scene instead of playing the main scene, you notice that by pressing the back, anything is happening. So let's fix that by going to the parent of this scene, which is going to be the new game scene, and add a new script to it, which is going to be called return to title. All of what we are going to do in this script is wait for a signal, which is going to be given by this button right here. So we can go to the node tab and connect the pressed signal to the return to title. And here we're going to reach out to the tree of our game, and we're going to change the scene to our title screen. And the title screen scene is located at res column / title underscore screen / title screen .tscn. We're going to save this. And if I press F6 and I click on the back, we are taken back to the title screen of our game. Now we want each of these buttons to load a different scene. And to know which scene to load, we are going to create a new script that's going to hold the information of the path of the scene that we want to load. To do so, let's go to the menu button and add a new script to it. And we're going to save it on the same folder as it is right now. So just click on create. And this script is going to export a string. It's going to be called scene to load. Now we can save this. Go back to our title screen. Select our buttons, and under the node, we have to reload the script. Do the same for the continue button and the same for the options button. And now we can go to each one of these scenes of our buttons and set the correct path for them to load. So the scene to load here is going to be the path of the scene that we want to load. And in this case right here is going to be res columns / game / options .tscn, and then we can press enter to save this, and Control S to save our scene. If we go back to the title screen, if I select the options button, we have the correct path right here. So just repeat the same thing for the continue. Save this. And now each of our buttons have the correct path to the respective scene that they have to load. Now we have to connect the pressed signal of these buttons right here to something that's going to load our scene. We're going to do so by creating a new script which is going to be attached to our title screen. And it's going to be called title_screen.gd. Save and create. On the ready function, we are going to connect each of our button signals to this node right here. And to do so, we're going to loop through them. So for each button that we have in our menu, center row, buttons dot get underscore children, we're going to connect to the pressed event on this node right here, and we're going to call the function on button pressed. And because we need to know which scene we're going to load, we're going to pass a parameter which is going to come from the button dot scene underscore to load. Now let's create this function. We can delete our process. This function is going to receive a parameter, it's going to be the scene to load. And here we're going to call get3.change underscore scene to the scene that we want to load. If you try to run this, you're going to get an error, and that is because we are expecting an array here and we are actually only passing one single variable to the function. And to fix this, all we have to do is put brackets around our button dot scene to load. Save and run. You see that if we click on new game, we go to the new game scene, continue the same thing, and options the same thing. Now we have to add our fade in effect. To do so, we're going to create a new script because we only want to load this scene when that fade in effect finishes. So we're going to go to our fade in scene, attach a new script to it. We're going to call this fade underscore in, save the script and create it. You can delete everything here. We're going to need a signal to signal the title screen that this fade has been finished. So we're going to call this signal fade underscore finished. We're also going to need a way to start the fading animation. So we're going to create a function called fade in, which is going to access our animation player and call play fade underscore in. And now we're going to connect a signal from our animation player, which is the animation finished, to our fade in script. And because we only have one animation, we don't actually need to check the animation name. So we're just going to emit the signal fade finished. We can save this script, go back to our title screen, select our fade in node, and we're going to connect this fade finished to our title screen. And here on this function, when the fade has finished is when we actually want to change the scene. So this code is going to come from here to here. And now we have to store this information somewhere else. So we're going to create a global variable to this script, which is going to be called scene path to load. When we press a button, we're going to set scene path to load to be equal to the scene to load. We are then going to show, because remember we hid it before, so we actually have to show it. And after we are showing it, so after it's visible, we're going to call the function that we just created, which was fade underscore in. Now we can save this, run our game. We're gonna get a simple error here because I'm using the wrong variable name. Rerun our game. Now, if we click on new game, for instance, we get the fading effect, and we can go back, continue, and everything is working fine. The last thing that we have to do is add support for keyboard, and that's pretty simple to do. In this case, all we're going to do is select the first button that we have, which is the new game button. And now that we have our new game button, we can call the function grab underscore focus. And this is going to set the focus of our UI to this element right here. We can run our game. And now you can notice that we have this blue border around our new game. And because of that, we can now use our keyboard to go down and up on our menu options, and if I press enter, we go to the continue scene. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them on the comment section. The final project of this tutorial is going to be as well on the description of the video, and I will see you in the next time.